Hi, this is Barb Ryan. It is May 21st, 2020. This is a night of insight. How can I tell when my intuition about something is correct? It just sometimes feels hard to determine the information I'm receiving. I make mistakes sometimes when I base my decisions solely on intuition. How can I tell when my intuition about something is correct? How can I tell when something feels aligned, when something feels right? How can I tell when it's what's best for me to do? How can I discern my truth? How can I trust my voice? How do I discern, is this coming from a higher place, from a physical desire, an emotional desire, or from my connection with spirit? And the idea of the word correct or right, I like to use the right word as in the sense of right livelihood or upright or aligned, that we're feeling aligned with something. So how do you discern when you are feeling aligned, when something is feeling true for you? That is the question here, right? And so you look at, how does it feel all the way? Do I feel aligned, as though something is pulling gently from the top of my head into the cosmos, and the earth is holding my feet and my spine is aligned? And as I make a decision in my life about what to do next, and we ask that question to check inside of yourself, right up next to your spine, inside yourself, inside the center of you, and notice. Notice if it feels aligned. And often when we exhale, it's like a sigh of relief. And in that moment, we know that that is what is ours to do. As we sigh, as we let go, as we have a sigh of relief, everything straightens up. Our shoulders are no longer being held up tight. They just straighten up. Our head is no longer being held stiffly. It just rests on our spine. So as our spine is aligned and we feel that connection from the cosmos to the earth, feel into that vibration. We learn to do that more and more. The more we do it, the more you'll learn how to do it. That's when you can trust that something is right for you. What does love say? What does love say about the safety of our food supply during the COVID pandemic? I often have the theme of these to say, what would love do? What would love say? And when I refer to that love, it's the greater love, divine love. So what does love say about this? What does love present to us? How are we reassured about the safety of our food supply during the COVID-19 pandemic? And during this pandemic, we are all learning a lot about discerning our truth, right? As in the last question, how do we know How do we know what's true? And discerning when we're listening to somebody, do they seem aligned or not? And if they don't seem aligned, it's best not to listen because it can throw us off kilter. And when someone does feel aligned with what we believe the truth to be or the truth that we seek, they seem to be a truth teller. They seem to know what they're speaking of, what they're talking about. Those are the ones that we can trust. And as we listen to them, I mean, it could be a family member, a neighbor, a news anchor, an official, someone who works for the health center or the disease patroller, all kinds of situations. But we look at who aligns with our higher self and with what we know to be true. How is that for us? So when we look at the question of our food safety, first, we look at what I have control over, what you have control over. Because the only things that we can change, I can only change what I think about, what I believe, what I do with my actions, and how I feel about something. And so as we feel into it, notice one of the things that has come out of the pandemic is that many people who never gardened before are now gardening, possibly because they're concerned about the food supply, but also because they're taking matters into their own hands, whether it's a patio that you're growing tomatoes or herbs, or whether it's a whole neighborhood getting together in shifts so that they're staying within social distancing. For growing food and trading seeds and people making victory gardens to share with their neighbors. And there's many people that can't afford to, don't have the time, don't have the space, don't have the knowledge to be gardening. And sharing as much information with them as we can is wonderful. Sharing as much food is wonderful. Not hoarding food, not buying more than what we need. When we look in our pantry and we have more than what we need, give it away. Give it away to the food bank. Give it away to somebody living in a tent. Give it away to somebody on the street. Give it away to a neighbor. The more that we give, as in anything else that's love-based, the more that we give, the more secure we will feel in what we do have. So it's about the lessons that are coming out of COVID-19 and not being afraid of the pandemic, addressing our fears. This one is the concern about food, so we're addressing that one first. And to know that, yes, there are many people who are suffering at this time. There are many people who were suffering and who were hungry and who were sick before COVID-19. Now there are so many more. The US has like 30% of stats aren't coming to me right now, but we're not the biggest population in the world, but we have the largest percentage of COVID-19 cases. And that is to say that we do need to pay attention and to be safe. So with our own food, you could have it delivered. There's a lot of places doing free deliveries now, or buying from a farm stand, wearing your mask, staying 6 feet away, following all the social distance, wearing gloves, washing your foods like never before, washing your hands like never before, and sharing as much as possible, right? And that's how not to focus on the fear of the food supply, but how to contribute in a loving way with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with our feelings, and with our actions. How can I? How can I achieve my goal? How can I achieve my goal of a healthy body and be happy, thin, and free? How can I achieve my goal of health and happiness, thinness, and freedom? We need to explore those words and what a healthy body means to us. Right now, there's a lot of focus on staying healthy so that we don't get sick, so that we don't get the COVID, so we don't get any other viruses or colds, so we don't spread our germs. But the other idea of healthy body is what we take into our body, how we treat our body, how we talk about ourselves, how we feed ourselves, how we move our body, how much exercise we get. And all of that is based on love. When we say, what would love do, when we're holding our bowl of oatmeal or whatever it might be, and if we're eating that because we're afraid that if we eat something else, we'll get sick, or we won't be well, or we will gain weight, or we will on and on and on out of fear, we're not going to digest that very well. But if we were eating that or any other food, and we took it in lovingly, and we took it in knowing that it vibrates with what our body needs, and it will be what is most healthy for us at that time. So it's a matter of not eating or exercising out of fear, but keeping our body healthy out of love. And the idea of being thin is up to each person what that even means to them. You know, there is a BMI index, there's all these different measurements, but there's also measurements that have to do with inside of you, that have to do with your cholesterol and your blood pressure and your oxygen levels and your liver levels and all kinds of other organs in your body and hormone levels and how your lymph system is cleaning everything out. Right? And what vitamins or supplements you might need to keep everything flowing as it needs to flow. And that's something else that you can ask in a loving way. How can I love myself in a way that keeps me healthy and happy and free? Free to be who I am. None of us are perfect. None of us have the perfect body. But each of us is perfectly who we are. I am perfectly Barb. I am perfectly healthy as Barb. I am perfectly happy as Barb. And I am free to be Barb, right? And each of you, that's true about you, that you are free to be healthy you, to be happy you, to be free you. The idea of happiness is not a goal that we get to when we've achieved other goals. It is a state of being. Healthy, happy, and free are all states of being. So the question really becomes, how can I be in a state of being of healthy, happy, and free? And that is the question you ask yourself with each thing that you're doing. And then notice the alignment about what your intuition is saying is true for you in that moment. And when asked the question for tonight about what would you like insight about, this person asks, can I be provided with insight on my personal relationships? I feel that I have trouble connecting with others who are at a different frequency or soul level than myself. This is an area where I'd like more insight because it has caused problems in my personal, romantic, and professional relationships. Yeah. So let's look at that. Insight on how we are in our personal relationships. Trouble connecting with others who are at a different frequency or soul level than myself. It's always easier to connect with people that are so similar to us, that are on a similar frequency, similar vibe, similar spiritual level, similar soul level, that we just feel drawn to. It's often going to be easier to communicate with them. And so as we look at what would love do, what would love do? How would love guide you to relate to people that are not at the same levels of you? They may not be at the same intellectual level. They may not be at the same emotional processing level. They may process differently. They may think differently. They may use their brain in different ways. They may be a different kind of learner than you. They may be overly sensitive, highly sensitive, or not as sensitive. People are all so different. And as we develop personal relationships, it is based on love, and not just romantic love, but divine love. To be able to see and know this person as a creative aspect of the divine. And they too are perfectly who they are, just as they are. And they're on a path that you might not recognize. They might be ahead of you on the path, behind you on the path, or not on the same path as you at all. And yet you're interacting with them. So there's somewhere that your paths are intersecting, and you have an opportunity to learn how to be most loving in that moment. Most loving and not judgmental. Not everyone will be our friend, but everyone is related to us as another human. Not everyone will be our family, and yet everyone is related to us as another human. Not everybody in our family will be friends. Not everybody in our friends will we feel family with. We get to define these words, and we get to create chosen family, and we get to deepen our relationships with those that we can. The more that we are a match with someone, and not necessarily on these levels, but a match in our intention and our desire. For instance, if we want to go deep and have deep conversations, and we meet with somebody else who also says that they want that, we need to be ready for that and say, what would love do there? And we also need to have healthy sort of limits and boundaries within our own self about what it is that we do with and for others. So there's so much involved in personal relationships. But it often comes down to saying, what would love do? What would be the best, most loving response from a divine love perspective? Sometimes that response is silence. Sometimes that response is taking time out. Sometimes that response is a big hug once we can hug each other again, or when we're surrounded by people that we can hug during this time. So it's very different, very individual. You can only work on how you feel, what you think, what you believe, how you want to relate. Become that for yourself. Become your own best friend. Become your lover. Become your cook. Become your own Zoom tech person. I mean, whatever it may be that you feel like you need from another, it's okay to learn some of how to do that with ourselves and for ourselves. And it teaches us more what it is that we want to share with others and that we want to learn from others. I'm having trouble with loving myself unconditionally. I've lost trust in myself and I'm afraid to open up to joy. What does love suggest I do to change this? Right? Well, unconditional love, that divine love, would be loving even the self, the part of you, the aspect of you that's having trouble loving yourself unconditionally. Have compassion and love for that part of yourself. Be forgiving and compassionate and say, it's okay. It's okay that I'm having trouble loving myself unconditionally. And we make a commitment to love ourselves as best we can. And then all day, every day, opportunities come up that say, how about this? Do you love this part? Do you love this part? Well, what about that thought? Well, what about that saboteur voice? Well, what about that part that just felt kind of mean or judgmental about my own self? What about that part that's having trouble loving myself? And each moment in that, you say, what would love do? What would unconditional love feel like? And we call that forth because part of divine love and unconditional love is the giving and the receiving of it. And so if we're having a hard time giving it to ourselves, we can still imagine receiving it. Literally giving yourself a hug and saying, what would it feel like right now to be unconditionally loved by myself? I have been so hard on myself. Most of us are harder on ourselves than anybody else. And so we say, would I talk to someone that I love that way? And use these screenings, if you will, these filtering systems to say, what would love do? How would love feel unconditionally? How would love give unconditionally to myself? And that's how we then learn how to do that with and for others. I believe that's what's meant when it says you need to truly love yourself before you can truly love another. Will a new relationship come into my life, or will an old one return? This isn't about futuring. The word will implies, how can I know what the future will bring into my life? When what loving ourselves is really about is in this moment, loving yourself so much that it won't matter when a new relationship or friendship or romantic relationship or lovership comes into your life. You just trust that each relationship that deepens in your life will be the most loving possible because that's what you're committing to yourself. So you commit to yourself and say, well, I develop a new relationship in my life with myself. How do I develop a new relationship in my life? How do I love myself even more? Well, the old relationship that I've had with me, those times I did love myself so much, will that come back? Or will those old self-sabotaging come back? Well, that we don't want to invite that back, and yet we want to love it. So when we find those self-sabotaging voices come up, explore them, look at them compassionately and lovingly, in loving ourselves. And this is the way truly that we prepare for new relationships in our life. And even if an old relationship, an old lovership comes back into our life, it's now new. It comes back in because there has been growth from both people that they might not even recognize each other at first, right? Just like when we're really loving ourselves And we began to shift and change and evolve and vibrate at a whole different frequency. We hardly recognize our own self. So to the question, will a new relationship come into my life or will an old one return? That is up to you and how loving you are to yourself. Because there's only this moment. Even the future is made up of this moment, and then this one, and then this one. And we have many opportunities all day, every day, to be asking, what would love do? How would love be? What would love say to me right now that then I can beam my loving light and see who that attracts into my life, that we can share a greater love. What can I do? What can I do when I feel sorry for myself? And feeling sorry for ourselves, feeling sorry for anybody, is really about disrespect. We might think that it's about love and empathy and compassion, but when we're feeling sorry for someone, including ourselves, we're saying, oh, you're not as good. You're not as worthy. You didn't make it. That's a failure. That's not okay. When a loving voice would say, first of all, it would love the part that feels sorry for yourself. So you'd say, I love myself even when I'm feeling sorry for myself. And I want to transform the feeling sorry for myself into truly loving myself. And I want to give myself all of the grace to love every aspect of me, to bring in that divine love, loving me, not putting myself down, feeling sorry for me, but feeling compassion and love. And the word compassion is like with passion, right? So we're feeling into what the other person feels. We're feeling compassion for ourselves. We're feeling into ourselves with that passion, with that love. So when we're feeling sorry for ourselves, look at what we're feeling disappointed about. Is there something that we feel like we should have done that we didn't do? Because if that's the case, we can say, well, if I really wanted to, I could have. And maybe you just didn't really want to. Or maybe you simply couldn't do it. So it's changing the shoulds into coulds. Shoulds are shaming. Feeling sorry for ourselves is collaborating with the shame. So looking at how to turn it around to a place of compassion. And as we're able to feel that for ourselves and be even able to say, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Say it to ourselves, I'm sorry that that happened to me. You know, lots of sad things are happening right now. People are pre-grieving for what they feel like they're losing. They're grieving for what they have lost. When they've lost people through death, or people who are sick, or people that they're really missing that they can't see right now, or jobs, or homes. There's a lot of reason to feel sorrow and grief right now. But sorrow and sorry are two different words. Sorrow is loving and sad and grief-filled. Sorry is shame and worthlessness and disrespect. So as we're looking at it and we realize that we really have sorrow and we're feeling sad about something that happened in our life, allow ourselves to grieve. Grief is a process. It's a very loving process. And as we move through that process, it becomes one of acceptance and loving. And it can take a long time. There's not a goal. We're not done with it. It just continues to transform. And each new grief brings up an old grief for some fine tuning around how we manage our sorrow and our grief. And we keep learning more about how to love ourselves even when we're grieving, how to love others in their grief, how to love the grief process itself. Because grieving is about letting go and accepting and learning, and the sorrow is a part of it. Grief isn't only sorrow, it has every feeling imaginable in that process. And if you feel in sorrow, that's okay. Know that you are grieving and love yourself for it. What does love say about the future of our children who've had their education disrupted? Again, love doesn't predict the future, but when we bring love from the present and we put it back and look at our whole past in the most loving way possible, right? When we look at what we see as our future in the most loving way possible, that's what love does with time. It filters it all through love. So, what does love say about the future of our children who've had their education disrupted? It's so different. It's going to be so different for every child. And right now, this is the norm. It normalizes it. It levels the playing field. There were some kids that just couldn't do school and were being homeschooled. All of a sudden, everybody was being homeschooled. And everybody, including the teachers and administrators and students and parents, were all on this huge learning curve of how to use technology to learn. And not everybody learns best through technology, through Zoom, and yet many do. Many thrived, you know. And many of the administrators and the teachers are looking at not so much grading as being a pass or no pass, that during this time, are you doing what you need to do to learn what you can and to let somebody know that you're learning what you can and let them know what you've learned? And if everybody's ready to go back to school in the fall, everybody will be coming from that homeschooled place. If schools and colleges don't yet open in the fall, people will have had this whole term to practice how to do that differently. We are all learning in this together. And it will be a different experience for each person. For those of you who have children in your life, especially children that were about to graduate, you know, every senior class in all the colleges and community colleges and grade schools and high schools, every one of them is not being able to graduate with a ceremony. And they're all figuring out ways to do it. And so to be able to be sure to reassure your children that as they step into their next step into a future that none of us know about, that they are as prepared as they can be. They may be more prepared than some of us when we graduated. They may be less prepared, but they are as prepared as they can be. And we want to prepare them with self-esteem and self-love and self-worthiness and a love of the planet, a love of other humans, looking at how they can be part of the solution, Maybe all of that is part of the education that they're getting, that then they can share with us. And the last piece of paper often sums up everything that we've been talking about, and there's always a theme created. So this one says, how can I know? How can I know I'm on the right path to happiness? And we've looked at, how do we know? How do we know that we're on the right path? Not right versus wrong, but right is in a line. How do we know that we are on our path, on the right path to happiness? And the path to happiness is being happy in the moment, in everything that we do, in everything that we say, everything that we think. Be able to say, what would love do? And as we are aligned with what we believe, we are being guided to do what love would do. That brings a sense of happiness or joy or contentment or fulfillment. There are many, many stories during this pandemic of people that are showing up in amazing ways for other people and bringing them happiness, right? There's people that are singing out of their balconies for people. There are singers and artists and comedians and all kinds of folks who are doing their own Facebook Live or Zooms and inviting people for free or for donations. And they're doing it because they love to do their art, their music, their show, their comedy. It brings happiness and love from them to the people who are in the audience. That's just an example. There's other people that are delivering food to people. Everybody is finding a way how they can contribute to being part of the solution. And even if someone is bedridden and they can't be out doing things, they might still be able to Zoom, or they can hold a prayer for someone. They can receive, they can watch, they can listen. They can be receptive. They can receive food that's coming to them. They can receive the gift of someone planting a garden for them. We each need to be receiving and learn how to do that in love, as much as we are then inspired to give some of what we have received. So how you can know that you're on the right path to happiness is to know that you feel aligned, that you have that sigh of relief, that you feel just a little bit better for the thinking of it or the doing of it. Okay, and now we look in the bowl and we say, the last question is always, is the bowl empty? And the bowl may look empty, but the bowl is not empty. It is full of wisdom, of happiness, of joy, of love, of compassion, of teachings. And I'm going to play the bowl to call back people back who have been listening. And whether you're listening later or you're listening to this live through Zoom, I'm going to play some of the bowl to bring you back. And then I will stop the recording. And to know that these happen the third Thursday of every month. At this time, they'll be on Zoom until further notice. And maybe then I'll keep doing them on Zoom for long distance folks. Okay, here's the callback.